Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Faculty in Focus, where we blur the lines between the work done by Ohio State Lima faculty and the greater Allen County community. I'm your host, Maggie Young, and throughout Faculty in Focus, we will explore Ohio State Lima faculty interests and how they relate to the greater Allen County region. Today, I'm excited to have with me Dr. Pat Carroll. Dr. Carroll is an associate professor of psychology who researches self-formation and identity change. Pat, thank you so much for being here today. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you grew up in Texas and attended a small regional campus, just like our beloved Ohio State Lima, right? Was this part of your
Yeah.
graduate studies or your undergraduate work?
Well, I did take a few classes for my undergraduate, but primarily it was for my graduate work. So I spent most of my time at UT for undergraduate. And then,
Awesome.
Austin was a big town with a lot of distractions. So my parents thought I should take a semester off, and I came down for one semester of my undergraduate and then went back up and completed it. But afterward, because I had liked psychology and I was kind of trying to find myself and where I wanted to go, I started taking psych graduate classes at Texas A&M Corpus Christi. That was where my dad worked, and I was initially planning to be a licensed practicing counselor. I really didn't have any plans to be a professor, but I was going through this process of, kind of really figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. And I read, this part of a book that was assigned in a class on self-construction and revision. And it was like, wow, this is exactly what I'm going through. And so it's like, I almost saw it really even at that point, I kind of saw it just as a way to help inform my situation. I didn't see this as something that I'd become a researcher looking at, but I was kind of encouraged by one of my instructors there to just drop out of that program and apply to a PhD program. So I did. Went to
That-
Florida.
There you go. I love
The
it.
rest is history.
The rest is history. So, what was the experience like for you going to school on one of those kind of small regional campuses? I think sometimes we get kind of maybe forgotten a little bit because there's the allure of the big city, but for you, really, you found your sense of self. I mean, maybe pun intended there, on that small campus, and you found kind of a niche there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it really was important, especially in the formative stages of what I wanted to do, because by the time I got to grad school, I mean, I already had a lot of big ideas about what I wanted to do. And frankly, I was just interested in letting the faculty get out of my way and just let me run my studies. But at the time that I had first started, I just wasn't ready to be like that. And so I needed that, one-on-one instruction. And I needed mentors to show me, okay, this is how you set up a study. This is how you would run a subject or analyze data. And that's something that I really do feel is much easier to receive at a regional campus. At the main campuses, unless you're in a doctorate program, you don't get much one-on-one time with your students. It's just the faculty that supervise the lab, they usually have postdocs, if not a formal lab manager, or graduate students that provide installation, kind of where most undergraduates are going to work with them, and even people that might be first year grad students might work with an older grad student or postdoc student. But I think that's in not going to be the case at a regional campus school. You're going to get where you're going to be the focus of
Right.
full professors. So
Yeah, and I mean, that's one of the things that I love about working here is that we do have that close contact with our students, and that
Yeah.
there's the close contact between us faculty members as well, that we get to learn a little bit more about what everyone does. So to take that opportunity, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about your research and what is it that you're hoping to understand better?
Well, yeah, no, I study the formation and change of identity, and I this, as I said, had a personal kind of interest to me. It was something coming out of undergraduate. I really didn't know what I was going to do with my life, and I think 100 years ago, really that point occurred when people were coming out of high school, or maybe even before. There wasn't this kind of assumption that people would go to college. And I think now college is almost becoming expected. And so kids are, taking longer and longer to kind of chart a life course. And I think as we've kind of evolved in our society, we become more complex. And with complexity comes uncertainty and comes constant, rapid change. And so, really, there's not much you can be certain of anymore, except the condition of uncertainty. That you're gonna what you're doing today may be different in a month. We see it with the pandemic, unfold where perhaps even as we were approaching the end of a semester, we weren't sure exactly when we were gonna end, or whether we were gonna pick up face to face, in the next semester. And so I think now the issue of identity has come to the fore. I think way back even in history in the medieval period, I think because the environments were so fixed, if you were a blacksmith, you lived in the same plot of land, you weren't constructing yourself, you certainly weren't revising yourself and pursuing these grand dreams. If you would have asked a blacksmith, where do you see yourself in 10 years? They probably would have looked at you like you were crazy. Because back then, well, I'm going to be here just like I was 10 years ago. But now, I mean, that's a very, kind of common question that people pose.
Oh, and
And
it's one of those questions that gets asked on interviews as well. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I think, I mean, exactly to your point, that this idea that we're constantly reinventing ourselves, or
yeah,
maybe evolving as our circumstances allow us to, or as we forge new circumstances, as we kind of plot our own course. I mean, I think like you, there are so many of us who were thinking when we were in high school or college or even after college, the question of what am I going to be when I grow up is in some cases like all consuming and so difficult to answer. And I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up until I was halfway through a master's program. And it wasn't until I found, what brought me so much joy and that I could
yeah,
endure hardships and difficulties, that I knew what I wanted to do, and then I could go from there. And I think that's kind of what was happening with you. But then you went and you decided not only to figure out what you wanted to do with your life, but also how to study it so that you can help
yeah,
other people. So it's like kind of a meta, what do I want to be in
yeah,
10 years kind
yeah.
of
Research
question.
is me search.
Right. Well, and I think that's one of the things that we can share, I mean, with our community, is how when we are researching things, it's not just that we find them interesting, but we're really trying to solve problems maybe that we're facing,
Oh, totally.
or problems that people who are close to us are facing. And
Yeah,
there's an
that's a
immediate
great point.
kind of feel. Yeah. You talked about the pandemic, and I do kind of want to talk about that in relationship to your research a little bit. So, I mean, you talk about how the impact of uncertainty or change, how that shapes or changes our identity. Has have you seen any changes in your self-identity research since the pandemic, or are you looking at changes in identity formation as a result of the pandemic?
Yeah, yeah. So I am, and one thing that it affects, and is part of my research, is the confidence with which people hold their kind of, their sense of who they are now, and by extension, where they see themselves going in the future. And so it kind of demonstrates nicely the parallel between the external environment and the internal. That if your environment is, marked with uncertainty, it's going to be, very hard for you to, with any degree of confidence, say, okay, this is something that I definitely am interested in doing, or that I'm going to do. That this is even right down to our attitudes about things, which can be part of ourselves. In fact, self esteem was considered just an attitude toward the self, good or bad. So I think that as uncertainty occurs, we're going to see a lot more uncertainty be kind of introjected into the self. And one way it manifests in my work is I focus a lot on the link between kind of these representations of who we are now and who we've been in the past, these kind of what I call core parts of identity. And so if you're a student and somebody tells you you're not a student, that's not really threatening because it's a fact. But if you're a student who aspires to become a doctor, and if somebody threatens your, kind of idea of becoming a doctor, that's something that's kind of tentative. That's not clear that you're going to get it. You might be likely to get it, and it may be that the doctor possible self, as we call it in my field, is something that's realistic for you, but it's unlike the student, which you are now, biology student, maybe even a pre-med student. You're not actually a doctor. And so I think the link, the extent to which you see these kind of possible selves is really kind of certainly flowing and clearly flowing from your core selves is going to, get a little bit mushier, a little bit more kind of tenuous.
So the way in which we kind of perceive that path forward, is it going to be a straight line path, or are all of these changes that we've been experiencing, is it going to make the path seem impassable or impossible?
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting. I think one of the things that I'm also kind of working on in my work, because I have seen this kind of increase in uncertainty about, possible cells from core cells. But I think also I've been looking at and seen some changes in the types of kind of theories or beliefs people have about, what they should expect in terms of the degree to which your plans are always going to work out. I'm noticing that people are factoring in, which I think is good, a little bit more kind of a I guess an error term or an uncertainty term
Right.
to their plans. That they realize that now things aren't like they used to be. They can change at the drop of a hat. And so, whereas before, I think when people failed, if they had done everything right and it was looking good, and if they failed, they'd be kind of shocked. I think now when they're approaching these plans, they're saying, okay, I'm setting my sight toward desirable horizons. I'm a pre-med student. I want to become a doctor. But I have to be realistic and know that, it doesn't just depend on my credentials. It depends on, the number of openings in the med school, whether there's, funding or, whatever. And, what's the level of competition and, things like that. And so there's just a lot more kind of, it seems, tolerance of ambiguity, maybe a little inoculation to it.
I mean, that has been the year, hasn't it? I mean, we've been spending all this time training ourselves to be flexible, to adapt. And I think that's maybe one of the best things that's come out of this rather horrible and tragic situation is that we are developing maybe a little bit more resiliency to change and to
Yeah.
adapting. Well, Pat, I did want to ask one other thing. I don't know if is anyone else around here that maybe sometimes struggles with, maybe a positive self-esteem or a positive self-concept or kind of that path to who you want to be. And I was wondering if you could share any skills that you've found to be helpful in your research that would help us develop more positive self-esteem or self-concept.
Yeah, I think that, a couple of things. First, some of the things I mentioned up top. So, when changing your construal and your response, the setback, whether you're experiencing difficulty or whether you pursue something and it doesn't work out, instead of kind of looking at it as an indictment on your character that you're worthless, instead look at it as kind of a learning experience, something that perhaps you could take away a lesson on how to improve yourself in the future. There may be a student out there that wants to become a doctor, and they think they're good in all sciences, but it turns out they're only good in mathematical and computer sciences. And so they apply to med school over and over again, and they don't get in, and they just dismiss it as bad luck or whatever. Well, what they could have done is they could have kind of looked in the mirror and seen that some of the feedback that they were getting from these admissions committees may have been, look, you have a lot of skills in these areas, but not what we were looking for, and realized they could still make a meaningful contribution in medicine, but just harnessing their skills in computer and math. So become a bioinformaticist or biostatistician, which are still very good, in esteemed professions, and you can make a meaningful contribution to medicine. So changing your reaction to kind of find a way to turn lemons into lemonade is a good thing, and to view failure and setback as a normal part of pursuing something meaningful. And then, another thing is also really find something that you're interested in. I don't think you can ever overstate the importance of having a true labor of love. Because if you're doing something because you're really passionate about it, it may not be the thing that pays you the most in the end. But if it's something you're really passionate about, you're going to feel a sense of pride, a sense of accomplishment, because when you're passionate, the work comes easy, frankly. And you almost feel guilty that you're getting paid to do it because it's what you want to do anyway. And
Right.
so find something you're interested in. And then, I think also, kind of be willing to kind of think about potential obstacles that could come in your way. I think one problem people have is, and this is a natural tendency, when we set out to do things, we set out only to succeed. So people don't plan to fail. They don't set goals to fail at them. But it doesn't mean that you have to plan to fail, but just be aware that there may be obstacles that might pop up. So get into the practice of trying to imagine, okay, what sorts of obstacles can come up, and then try to generate like 3 or 4 plans to overcome that obstacle. And it may be that that obstacle never comes up, but what happens is you get into the practice of becoming good at responding effectively to those types of things. So rather than, just kind of being kicked in the, you know,
In the
the
teeth.
in the teeth and not know how to respond, instead when you face an obstacle, you're quick to have a proactive response to it. And I think having that in the face of setback also helps to build a sense of self-esteem and worth. And my work shows that it does. That a greater sense of life purpose comes to those who have failed once or twice but responded effectively than those who have never failed at all.
That's so great. I mean, it's a little reassuring to know that these are skills that can be practiced and built over time that we
Yeah.
can really kind of grow and continue to evolve and adapt and find kind of the best possible version of ourselves. So,
Yes.
Pat, I am so glad that you were able to join us for this episode of Faculty in Focus. Congratulations on joining the select group of Ohio State Lima faculty invited to the Mug Club, which will be delivered to your office
Oh, wow.
as part of our focus on faculty scholarship, both inside and outside of the classroom. For everyone
Oh,
watching, be sure to check out our other episodes of Faculty in Focus on the Ohio State Lima YouTube channel. And from all of us here at OSU Lima, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Faculty in Focus. Until next time.
thank you.